Welcome back to another episode of Lost Codex Legends. My name is Jesse, and today we are talking about one of my absolute favorite characters on the Alliance side. This lady has a lot of story, a lot of background from the earliest days of World of Warcraft, but it got that much better in Chronicle when things were explained a little bit better. I'm of course talking about one of the members of the Council of Three Hammers, the leader of the Dark Iron Dwarves. I'm talking about Moira Thaurissan. Ooh, Moira! Without further ado, let's talk Moira. Now, Moira Bronzebeard was born to King Magni Bronzebeard and Heir Bronzebeard. Now, while Magni did love his daughter without a doubt, there was a little bit of disappointment, as Moira was not the male heir that Magni had hoped for, the male heir that Magni had hoped would take the throne after he passed on, and as such, Moira was treated differently. At a young age, Moira lost her mother to a Frostmane troll attack near Ironforge, and one of the last things that Heir said to Magni was that she had always wanted him to be there for Moira. Magni, who was somewhat misguided, again still a little bit disappointed, began to train Moira in the ways of a warrior to prepare her for anything. And this unfortunately created a rift between Moira and Magni, as he was making her into something that ultimately she wasn't. Now, the laws of succession in Ironforge state that because Moira had no brothers, she was the next in line for the throne, and while I believe it is highly unlikely that Magni would have actually disputed the claim and prevented her from taking the throne, he still believed that a woman was not able to rule with the same ability as a man was able to. Magni, it's a little bit outdated thinking there. It's pretty stone-headed of you to think like that. Stone-headed. Moving on. Ultimately, Moira's rise to power starts with, ironically, a loss of power with her abduction by the Dark Iron Dwarves. She was brought to Emperor Regent Thaurissan in Shadowforge City, Blackrock Depths, and the reason she was brought here was that she was insurance for a war that Dagran intended on starting. If he had her captive, Magni would never launch an attack against Shadowforge City. Dagran had a plan. However, Emperor Thaurissan found himself with an unexpected barricade, as he never expected to get along with Moira. She was meant to be a political tool, a prisoner of his, and turns out Thaurissan looked at her and went, ooh. Moira had sharp wit and a strong will and was not intimidated in any slight by her predicament as a prisoner of Emperor Thaurissan, and eventually the two began to talk. The two began to speak to one another, and they began to talk at lengths, and Thaurissan actually opened himself up to her. He laid himself vulnerable in front of her, and he confided to Moira that in reality he wanted to free his people. He wasn't willingly loyal to Ragnaros and the cultists and the old gods. He wanted to free his people from the Fire Lord's grasp, something that one of his ancient ancestors, relatives, had done years prior when they summoned Ragnaros into the world. And Moira got to learn a little bit more about Dagran Thaurissan in this moment. One of the dwarves by the name of Karen Mighthammer, who was actually one of the only surviving guards of Moira's party when they were ambushed by the Dark Irons, is saved by the Alliance and comes to the conclusion that the princess is actually enchanted. She's been ensnared by Emperor Thaurissan's dark magic, they are known for their magic, and believes that she is a prisoner against her free will, but not entirely of her own mental free will. The truth of the matter is, Moira actually liked Thaurissan on her own free will. She actually started to fall for him. He opened himself up to her, made himself vulnerable, told her a lot of his own personal secrets and desires and fears for his people, and ultimately he respected Moira, and that's not something that she was really given back home by her own dad, and she saw him for something that he really wasn't. The Dark Irons had been painted as these monsters by the Bronzebeards, and likely vice versa as well, but she saw just a leader, a troubled leader trying to do what's best for his people, and so Moira thought, you know what, maybe you're not so bad. Ultimately, King Magni hears of this, hears of Moira being enchanted by Emperor Thaurissan, and sends a team of heroes to go kill Emperor Thaurissan. The Alliance are sent to kill him and retrieve the enchanted Moira and return her back to her capital city to serve in Ironforge. However, Moira refuses to come home and announces that she is actually pregnant with Thaurissan's child. And not just that, but before the attack and before Thaurissan had been butchered, she and him had actually been married, and then he was killed on the rescue mission. The death of her husband had left a terrible, terrible fire within her, and for years after that event that happened canonically in classic WoW era, she's not heard of from the people of Ironforge or Magni, and definitely estranged from her father. Now, of course, in game I believe you can actually kill her, or you used to be able to kill her. Despite being told this, Magni actually still believes that she'd been magically charmed, and would never have fallen in love with the enemy. He still hopes that one day Moira will return to Ironforge, but never made any moves to disinherit her. There was no moves to delegitimize her claim to the throne. She just was distant and estranged for the longest time. Now, Magni did learn a few lessons from his daughter's distant attitude and strong will. First and foremost, after all this happened, Erin and several other qualified women were promoted to join his elite personal guard, something that had never been done before. Erin believes that this was a result of him finally realizing that his sexist attitude had been not fair at all to Moira, and so Magni begins to make some changes. Magni begins to take steps to improve his otherwise very outdated mentality. Now, Moira, this is where Moira's story gets really interesting in Chronicle. She actually stays in Shadowforge City after her husband's death and hopes to further Dagran's plans to free the Dark Iron. So you can imagine that this was probably not an easy time for her. This is, she is ultimately visually not a Dark Iron. Her skin color isn't the same. Her background isn't the same at all. And likely there were those who did not see her as a legitimate queen, for she's just a Bronzebeard with a different name. So you can imagine that this time would be difficult for her, and yet still she's badass. The first thing she starts to do to increase her power and her influence amongst the Dark Irons is that she spreads news that the Fire Lord was amassing an army and told of riches and artifacts hidden in his underground stronghold, the Molten Core. She hoped that this would attract many adventurous or potentially greedy heroes that would strike at the Fire Lord and banish him back to the Firelands. Now, Moira's plan actually succeeds more than she could have hoped for, as the Hydraxian Water Lords entered the fray in this battle against Ragnaros. Of course, the Water Lords had problems with the denizens of the Firelands, and as such, they offer up their own rewards in addition to those found within the Molten Core. And as such, adventurers charge into the Molten Core, clear house, grab their loot, and banish Ragnaros back to the Firelands, thus freeing Moira and the Dark Irons from the grasp of the Fire Lord. Now, the lower half of Blackrock Mountain has now been saved, has now been reclaimed by the Dark Irons, but the upper half is still a problem, and so Moira flexes her little puppet strings and spreads word of the Dark Horde and their alliance with the Black Dragonflight to the distant shores of Kalimdor. News reaches Durotar and news reaches Orgrimmar of this threat. Through Moira's spies and spreading of information, Thrall and the other leaders of the Horde learn of Ren Blackhand's alliance with Nefarian and the experiments they're committing, and they're amassing armies, and basically she encourages, through these rumors and through this spread of information, the Horde soldiers to go into Blackrock Spire, Lower, Upper, and Blackwing Lair and clear house, kill Rend, kill Nefarian, put a stop to all of it. The Horde does that, but the Horde does it because of Moira. Moira's the one that spreads the information. Moira's the one that gets all that information out, thus clearing the upper portions of Blackrock Mountain. And this is all learned in Chronicle, of course. We don't know this back in the day. None of this information kind of was known to us, but that's because she's doing it behind the scenes. She's, manipulating things behind the scenes, kind of in the same way Katrina Prestor was for a lot of different things. And to me, that's amazing. I always wondered, after Blackrock Depths, what the hell did Moira do between that and Cataclysm? What were you doing? But it's clear that she was doing some stuff, as well as earning the respect and loyalty of her people, and obviously they cherished her for that. She cleared out the Molten Core and Ragnaros. She cleared out the dragons and the Blackrock Orcs in the Upper Spire, and they actually celebrated and sort of embraced Moira as their queen. Now, of course, not every single Dark Iron pledged themselves to Moira, but many did. Most of them did, thus proving that she was an apt politician, and that perhaps she was even more skilled at politics than her own father was. So, shame on you, Magni. Shame on you. Fast forward to the Cataclysm, the Shattering story, where Moira doesn't actually get a chance to reconnect with her dad when she returns, because in the prelude to the Cataclysm, Magni tries to save Ironforge from a impending cataclysmic event and instead turns himself into a giant block of diamond. Moira returns after, and she's technically still the throne, so she returns to Ironforge with her infant son, Shandryn and Laytis II, and a whole bunch of dark iron dwarves, and claims the city of Ironforge, which she rules with an iron fist. It's very much an oppressive regime. It's not a nice time in Ironforge, but by dwarven law, she is the queen. Now, she not only closes the Deep Run tram, she not only keeps all the people of Ironforge hostage, but she also keeps Anduin Wrynn hostage, who had been serving in Ironforge as a ward to Magni, as a ambassador for Stormwind, which is not a good thing to do. Not a good thing to imprison the son of the High King of the Alliance. Bad decision. Worst decision ever. Despite this, Varian has no clue what's going on, and Anduin's pretty much on his own in this sort of locked down city of Ironforge, literally locked down, and he begins to talk with Moira. He begins to learn more about her, and both of them being the children of kings, you know, they have a lot more in common than she originally anticipates. And Anduin uses some clever wordplay, some clever mind tricks to get her to reveal her hand and get her to reveal a little bit more about herself to Anduin. Anduin learns that not only had Magni thought she was unfit to rule because simply she was a female, but also that she had never been enchanted or ensnared magically by Dagran, but she had actually fallen for him. He had respected her, unlike Magni, and believed her to be a powerful force, while Magni had believed in none of that. And so her iron rule over Ironforge was sort of her taking her anger out on the people of Ironforge because of her father's actions. Now, Anduin, realizing that she's ruling out of resentment for her father, you know, he'd never believed in her at all, eventually escapes to Theramore and passes on news to his father that Moira and her Dark Iron clan pretty much had Ironforge and had him hostage. Enraged, Varian and several SI-7 agents embark on a mission to liberate Ironforge and to assassinate Moira. They're going in to kill. Fortunately, Anduin makes it back to Ironforge in time, and just as Varian's about to execute Moira, he is fully prepared just to cut her down. Anduin stops him, and Anduin says, perhaps it would be better to guide Moira as a leader, as a better leader, than outright killing her, because even though she was a tyrant who held the city hostage, she was still heir to the throne, and killing her would put the succession to the throne into a fit of chaos, perhaps even starting a new civil war amongst the dwarves. Killing her would literally solve nothing, and Anduin says, why don't we try to help her become a good leader? Varian, while shows mercy, says, no, we're not going to put her in charge. She's clearly a little bit too upset, so we're going to make things a little bit more fair. Varian believes that Moira needs to earn her crown by earning her people's respect. In order to take into account the different opinions of both the Bronzebeard, the Dark Irons, but also the Wildhammer clan, Varian calls for the formation of the Council of Three Hammers, which would be led by Moira Bronzebeard to represent, or now Moira Thaurissan to represent the Dark Irons, her uncle Muradin to represent the Bronzebeards, and of course, Wildhammer Thane Falstad Wildhammer.
Isn't Falstad dead?
Now, in the short story Fire and Iron, Moira is trying in every way to integrate the Dark Irons into Ironforge society. There's a lot of hatred between all three dwarven clans. The Wildhammers and the Bronzebeards sneer at each other and snarl at each other. They're not super best friends, but the Dark Irons seem to be the one that everyone hates the most, and in a way, rightfully so. Like ancient Thaurissan back in the day, summoned Ragnaros, you know, his wife once wielded Xalatath. It was not a good time. They were not good dwarves, and as such, that one sort of, you know, dick lord of the Dark Irons back in the day kind of ruined it for a lot of Dark Irons because his people were enslaved by Ragnaros for years, so they were bitter and angry and hated their cousins, but at the same time, their ancient king kind of made them deserve it. It's weird. The Dark Irons were kind of always the hated ones amongst the dwarven cousins, that really weird distant cousin that you don't talk to. That was the Dark Irons, and so Ironforge is a little bit awkward. Ironforge, everyone's kind of, no one's having much fun in Ironforge during these days. To do so, Moira decides that she plans to reconstruct the Hammer of the High King, an ancient dwarven relic in which all three clans held a different piece. She wanted it to symbolize the unity between the clans and bring about this ancient piece of dwarven history. Dwarves love history. This is a good political movement. This is a good political move. Good job, Moira. You're on the right track here. Now, Curdran Wildhammer, who's actually decided to replace Falstad as he saw that it was his duty to his clan to be on the Council of Three Hammers, was very hesitant to give his piece of the hammer, but after several days of convincing, all three parts were put together and ready to be forged. However, just before this happened, Curdran loses his beloved griffin and actually believes the Dark Irons are responsible for it, and is thus pulls his piece of the hammer back. Moira argues him for it, claiming that the Wildhammer is now being stubborn and unproductive for the unity of dwarves. Her narrative starts to twist it a little bit and starts to imply that the Wildhammers are the alienated ones. The Wildhammers are the outcasts, thus creating a sort of, or an attempted created bond between the Bronzebeard and Dark Irons, while alienating the other clan and thus earning more respect between Moira's Bloodborne clan and her now clan that she ruled through marriage. Curdran, however, wants to tell a different story, and thus he waits for the public ceremony in which the hammer is going to be forged, and during the ceremony he dramatically smashes the piece that belonged to the Wildhammers. Curdran justifies his action by stating that the unity of the dwarves could not be based on a physical artifact that can simply be destroyed, and that they should begin anew with a clean slate. Muradin gladly agrees to this, and Moira, who's now been politically outmoved, this is more of a political move by Curdran now to make it seem like he is not the disobedient or the frustrating one. In fact, he's doing it for the good of the dwarves. He's doing it for the good of their people. She follows suit and also has the Dark Iron piece completely shattered. After this, Curdran realized that Falstad is a better fit for the council and steps down shortly after this. Now we fast forward a little bit into the Cataclysm, and even though Moira is Queen Regent to the Dark Iron clan, not all the Dark Irons are loyal to her. We knew this back when she successfully cleared out House in Blackrock Depths and the Blackrock Spire. They see her just as a Dark Iron in name. She's just a Bronzebeard. And we know that in Shadowforge City, when you do the dungeon, there are Twilight's Hammer cultists there. So it's no surprise that those who are sort of fueling the fires of discontent, those who aren't loyal to Moira, is probably done by the Twilight's Hammer. After the Twilight's Hammer attacks the Ironforge airfield base, Iron Stonebreaker sends a hero, that's you, to the council to tell them what happened. Moira refuses to acknowledge that the Dark Irons would ever attack Ironforge. She does not believe it. A little bit ignorant here. But Muradin vouches for Stonebreaker's loyalty. There's no way that he would be lying. After Muradin and Falstad call her out on not being able to control her own people, she's determined to find out who is responsible for these attacks, and has Dark Iron Ambassador Slaghammer, who actually was working for the Twilight's Hammer, arrested for treason. Fast forward to Miss Pandaria, and the Council of Three Hammers still don't really trust each other. It's still awkward. Your weird distant cousin is still over for dinner and just won't go away, and this is not getting any better. Varian scouts discover that Zandalari trolls are sort of rallying the Frostmane tribes around Dun Morogh, and the king says, well, hey, if I help them with the troll problem, I will gain more allies for the Pandaria front lines, the war against the Horde. And so when Varian comes along and asks for help, the Bronzebeard and the Wildhammers say no. Varian learns that they don't trust each other at all, and they are actually worried that if they leave to go help Varian, the Dark Iron clan will strike when they're gone and reclaim Ironforge. They are very paranoid that Moira is going to do everything in her power to claim Ironforge. Once upon a time, she was like that, but it's been a little while. But they still don't trust her. Instead, Moira is the only one who offers aid, stating that the Dark Irons will prove their loyalty not only to the Alliance and Varian, but also to Ironforge and the Council as well, and thus leaving her uncle and the other, the Wildhammer representative, back in Ironforge to think about their action. Moira, her Forge Guard, and Varian and the hero head off into the snow to fight back against the Frostmane and the Zandalari, and they are obviously successful. In the aftermath of the battle, Varian actually commends Moira and her Dark Irons for their victory in battle, and actually says that the Wildhammers and the Bronzebeards are gonna regret not having been there for that battle. Moira, who's ever the politician, humbly states that her intentions was to protect and impress, not to shame, to which Varian acknowledges that she accomplished just that. Upon returning to Ironforge to let the other dwarven leaders know that they were in fact victorious, the other dwarven leaders on the council actually admit their regret. They are ashamed for their behavior, and they vow to never again let fear or distrust cloud their judgment. Free to trust one another, officially, the full Council Three Hammers pledges all of their forces, Bronzebeard, Wildhammer, and Dark Irons, to the Alliance cause and to Varian's mission against the Horde. This is where things start to look up for the dwarves. Now they're starting to see eye to eye a little bit. It only took several different stories, but finally, things are starting to look up for the dwarves. Fast forward to the Siege of Orgrimmar, where we see Moira again, with her and her troops drilling underneath Orgrimmar into the siege works. She's encountered near the Siegecrafter Blackfuse area, and she talks to the Alliance and warns them about the dangers of Blackfuse's technology. After the Siege of Orgrimmar, she is seen present at the trial for Garrosh Hellscream in the novel War Crimes. Moira is briefly mentioned in the Jade Hunters short story, where her and the other members of the council would actually blackmail a Bronzebeard, a Dark Iron, and a Wildhammer, a bunch of dwarven builders, to work together and help rebuild the Jade Serpent statue. Moira plays a significant role in the Fault Lines comic, which features Magni's reawakening. 4 years after Magni's petrification, Moira was asked by Muradin and some of the other priests to talk to her petrified father, as she often did when times were trying, in hopes that it would wake him up. Now, Moira herself sees it as a fool's errand and scolds the unmoving body of her father, saying that the thought of his daughter sitting on the throne of Ironforge would just eat him up inside, and that he never gave her a chance to prove herself because she was female. So a lot of these older emotions that we talked about earlier, they start to really come out. The side that she showed to Anduin now really starts to come out. However, to the vast surprise of both Moira and advisor Belgrim, Magni suddenly just awakes as a living statue of solid diamond. The council is a little bit worried that Magni's now going to try to claim the throne, but Magni replies that he's not back for the throne, but offers a warning about the Burning Legion's return. He asks his daughter to see him off and talk with her outside the gates of Ironforge, where he reveals that he's actually watched her progress and develop into a leader since her return, and unlike what she had thought earlier in the day when she snarls at her father's statue, he couldn't actually be prouder of what she had become. Now, Magni, in a shocking move, especially for a dwarf, admits that he had failed her completely as a father, and hopes that she would give him a second opportunity to be family again. The former King of Ironforge heads off to warn the rest of the Alliance about the Legion, but wants to give Moira time to think about it, and lets her know that his connection to the Earth will allow him to watch over her no matter what. As Moira watches Magni walk away into the snow, she begins to cry, which is something that the hardened Queen Regent doesn't seem to do often, even in the most trying of times. So this is a very emotional moment for Moira. Everything that she had lived through her childhood and her adulthood, the disapproval of her father, and hearing him admit those words of, I was wrong, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, that's a lot. And so that thus begins the reconnection between Moira and Dad. In Legion, Moira, along with the other members of the Council of Three Hammers, led the defense of Dunmorrow during the Legion invasion event. After the Battle of the Broken Shore, Moira attends the funeral of Varian Wrynn and says that she knows what Anduin is going through, for she too has lost a father and a king. She later works with Velen and Alonza's Fowl to unite priests of every religion at the Netherlight Temple, and she seems to be less active as a leader of Ironforge here and more active as a priest in this storyline. Obviously, this is the expansion about classes, not about factions. I guess we could assume that Muradin and Falstad just had some chill times in Ironforge while Moira was off saving the world as a priest. Who knows? Before the Storm, she's present because Netherlight Temple and Anduin play a role in the story. And after the Legion's defeat, Moira welcomes King Anduin, who had gifted Ironforge 10 wagons of barley. My God, the best sort of present a dwarf could ask for. Ironforge treats Anduin and his entourage to a feast to celebrate this gift. By the time dessert was being served, Moira, Anduin, and her little son, who's now a toddler, Dagran, would go for a walk through Old Ironforge to help digest their meal. And here, as they walk, they reminisce on good old times. And they talk about their past mistakes and how much they had grown and the unity of the dwarves and about the fathers they had both lost. They presumably also talk about, the tension that once was there, when she held him captive in Ironforge and how Varian almost completely murdered her, and, just the good old days, right? As Moira and Anduin have a very pleasant conversation because they're now friends, they are told that Magni's returned to Ironforge and requires a conference with both of them. Moira and Anduin find Magni in the library section of the Hall of Explorers, conversing with a number of different officials. Magni explains that Azeroth has been wounded, and that must set to healing her wounds, or she will perish. And thus begins the age of Magni's wounds screaming. Thus, Magni has been recruiting priests and other healers for that exact purpose. Moira proposes that they reach out to the Conclave, the priest class hall. This is after Legion, so the priest class hall is not inactive, but it's after the fact, so Moira, the campaign's over, but Moira says, hey, let's reach out to them for this endeavor. Anduin also shows the Council of Alliance Leaders the Shard of Azerite he had been given by Matthias Shaw, and explains its relevance to Azeroth and technology. With their purpose clear, the leader of the Alliance set on their tasks, but before Moira leaves, she introduces Magni to his grandson. A nice little heartwarming moment there. Later on, Anduin, Velen, and Moira portaled to the Netherlight Temple, where Moira was the one who recruited the Conclave in their endeavors to heal Azeroth. Fast forward through the Before the Storm book into Battle for Azeroth, when Moira is involved in the Dark Iron storyline. With all that they've already accomplished, Moira's people are now officially part of the Alliance, Moira finds herself thinking of the future of the Dark Irons and their relation to the Alliance. Of course, this is all brought on by the newly constructed embassy in Stormwind. After this, at the Black Anvil in Shadowforge City, the Dark Irons are smelting Azerite at Anduin's request. As Moira's watching this happen, the Dark Irons are attacked by the Venture Company, who not only damage the Black Anvil, but also steal the artifact hammer that was used to smelt the Azerite, the epic hammer you may know from Blackrock Depths known as Ironfoe. After the hammer was recovered from the leader of the Venture Company, Mogul Razdunk, Moira sends the Alliance champion into the Molten Core to retrieve a piece of the core to repair the anvil. Following that, the champion is sent to the Firelands to charge it with the power of the defeated Ragnaros, the defeated Firelord. And while they're there, they discover the cult of Ragnaros attempting to revive our old dead buddy, because they saw Moira as a weak leader, and the cult was fought off, but not defeated. That's important, potentially, for future storylines, not defeated. But yeah, they see Moira as a weak leader, so they wanted to bring back the cult and the tyrant who had them enslaved. Some dwarves just don't think. With the hammer retrieved and the Black Anvil repaired, Moira returns to Stormwind, where she and Anduin make the Dark Iron Dwarves' membership into the Alliance 100% official. And this is sort of a reference to the Dark Irons have been a part of the Alliance for years, but now they're officially a playable allied race. So, how could Blizzard word that in? And they actually worded it into the story. It's actually a little dialogue between Anduin and Moira. And Anduin says, yet we never officially asked your clan to stand with us in the Alliance. An oversight I hope you forgive and allow me to rectify. And Moira says, it's just a formality, King, no harm done. The Dark Iron accept your invitation for the Alliance. So they've been part of the Alliance for years, but there was never an official invite. It was to basically allow them to be playable. And Blizzard put in some nice writing with Anduin saying, I hope you can forgive the technical oversight that happened as a result of this. After you do the Dark Iron Allied Race Unlock scenario, Moira is present at the Black Anvil, where she greets new Dark Iron adventurers who are setting off into the world when you create your new Dark Iron hero. And that's all we got for Moira Thaurissan, the Queen Regent of the Dark Iron clan. One of the coolest characters who's been around for a while and whose story started off so scattered and so just minor and grew over time. Obviously, back in Cataclysm, it was a neat reference to get to Blackrock Depths to save the princess, only to learn, what? You're not coming with us? We're not saving you? This is not a typical defeat the bad guy, save the princess kind of situation. This is weird. And her storyline evolved from there. Chronicle puts her into some background shadow play moves where she's basically taken out Ragnaros, the Dark Horde, and Nefarian, which is super dope. A very minor fact that unless you've read Chronicle, you wouldn't know. The amount of people who don't realize that Moira Thaurissan, she wasn't Bronzebeard at the time, Moira Thaurissan is responsible for Rend, Nefarian, and Ragnaros being cleared out. That's just really cool. She power played the entire world, the Alliance and Horde, beautifully, and then returned to Ironforge, where she was a dick for a while. And then she's learned and evolved a lot, and rightfully so. She was a dick for a while, rightfully so, because, you know, Magni was a dick. But there's a lot of evolution. There's a lot of character growth in this storyline with both Moira, with both Magni, realizing that he was an asshole. And, God, dwarven growth, no pun intended there, is amazing. I love dwarves. Dwarves are cool. And Moira, amazing character. Love Moira. As for the future for Moira, I have no idea. In reality, I don't really have any clue. I think Magni's going to take a step back in Shadowlands. He's probably going to go yell at Khadgar about wounds of some kind, but I'd like to see Moira involved, and maybe she comes with us and meets Mom in the Shadowlands. You know, we're getting all these dad reunions, but what about mom reunions? That'd be fun. Also, we don't have a lot of dwarven ladies in the story. And Blizzard, we need 1,000% more dwarven ladies in the story. Dark Iron, Wildhammer, playable Wildhammer. My God, I'm excited. Unrelated. And Bronzebeard. We need Wildhammer ladies. We need dwarven ladies of all clans. More in the story. And if it happens to be a dead dwarven lady, fine. But let's bring in Mama Bronzebeard. That'd be interesting. I'd like to see her in some way. Also, Moira is involved in the Priest Class Hall. And she was one of 3 leaders, her, Velen, and Alonsis Fowl. Velen represented the Holy Spec, Alonsis Fowl represented the Discipline Spec, so Moira represents the Shadow. I'd like to see that come into play. I'd like to see Moira more as a priest, more as a Shadow Priest, and I don't know. I think it'd be cool to see her more as just the Queen of the Dark Irons. I think it'd be cool to see her not only as the Queen of the Dark Irons, because that's really cool, and I love the Dark Iron allied race, but also just see her playing upon her priest role in some way. I don't know, maybe that'll come into play. You know, why would the Queen of the Dark Irons go to the Shadowlands, but a priest, you know, maybe there's something there. I don't know. I'd like to see if she is involved. Maybe she's involved in 8.3 in the Alliance Leader and the Horde Leader questline, I'm not too sure. Obviously I haven't done that yet, but I'd like to see her play a role in the Shadowlands. She's one of those characters who's been involved kind of in Mist a little bit, and involved a little bit in Legion, and a little bit in Battle for Azeroth, but she's never had a main role, and it'd be kind of fun to see her play or step up a little bit more. So maybe some more Moira soon. More Moira. There's a pun there, I'm not going to try. And that's all I got from Moira Thaurissan of the Dark Iron clan. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on the special Queen Regent of the Dark Irons, daughter of Magni Bronzebeard, and the standing member of the Dark Iron clans of the Council of Three Hammers. My name is Jesse, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Lost Codex Legends. Until then.